We have some interesting developments from the recently released, and when I say recently released, I'm talking as in yesterday, for the Chinese action RPG, Black Myth Wukong, which is breaking records right now on Steam. The game has blown past Elden Ring and Cyberpunk 2077 for concurrent player count on Steam. At the time of this article, the game has become the fourth most concurrently played game in Steam history with over 2 million players at this moment. And the reason for those numbers being so high is because of China. Chinese players have helped this game tremendously in its market performance thus far. And this is just on PC. This isn't even counting how the game is performing on console. Now, China has a population of over 1.4 billion people, and the game was made by a Chinese developer, and it's based off of a legendary Chinese novel, Journey to the West, which was written in the 16th century. And so a lot of Chinese people clearly hold that story, that novel, Journey to the West, in high regard. And they're basically viewing this game as a adaptation, like a direct adaptation to that, which is part of the reason why it's doing so well. Probably the key reason why it's doing so well. But if we look at the numbers here, this is the all-time list for concurrent players. It has shot right past Elden Ring at just under 1 million players and Cyberpunk 2077 at 1 million. And it's earned the number 2 spot. Now, here's the real question about this. What does this really mean? Well, that's a good question. And the answer is simple. It doesn't mean anything. It means nothing whatsoever. Now, this is great news for the developer Game Science. It's also great news for the game itself because clearly it's going to be successful. But if we go back to the actual critic reviews of the game, which the Metascore has dropped as of this morning, it dropped 1 point. The game was at an 82, and now it's dropped to an 81. So it's on par with Stellar Blade that came out back in April, out of 58 different critic reviews. So 4 reviews, I believe 4 have been added. Which 4 those are, I'm not sure, but clearly it has to be in the mediocre category because it's dragged down the overall Metascore. Eurogamer, this is a new one. Another new one would be Spazio Games, NME. There must be one more that I'm missing here. But it seems Eurogamer's review has dragged down the overall Metascore even further. And its description reads, "Its dramatic and spectacular boss fights just about keep Black Myth Wukong afloat, but behind all its glitz and glamour is a frustratingly hollow and rudderless action game." So the game doing well on Steam and performing better than other major AAA games that have come out over the last 4 or so years doesn't take away from what's wrong with the game. It doesn't take away the technical issues that's wrong with the game. It doesn't take away the limited exploration that's been described across multiple reviews. It doesn't take away the fact that the game clearly doesn't place any sort of emphasis on storytelling. It doesn't take away from the fact that the game can be broken early on. And it doesn't take away the fact that the game ultimately doesn't live up to the hype. And what's more, if you actually look at the user reviews here, there's 93,278 user reviews, and that number is only a summary of reviews written by consumers that purchased the game directly from Steam itself. And here's the important part right here. We have 4,000 different reviews that have been written in the English language, and then we have over 127,000 that have been written in other languages. And guess which language most of those reviews are written in? They're of course written in Chinese, from Chinese players. But if you look closely at these reviews, I'm going to translate one of these. In fact, I will translate this one since this one has been marked as the most helpful, with 5,945 people finding this quote-unquote review helpful. I'm going to translate this to English. Now, I'm not going to read this entire thing, but certain lines I'm going to pick out. I woke up twice this morning, but it was not yet time to open. In the last half hour, I was calm and didn't feel a trace of waves. Now, within those two lines already, I can tell that this is not a serious review. It's very cringeworthy to read. And beyond that, it's written like it's a poem instead of an actual review. And of course, as I continue to skim here through this review, quote unquote, I have come to the realization that this is not a review. This is basically a fanboy gushing over a product that at the time of this post for this review, this person only put in 0.2 hours. Now, what is 0.2 hours? Well, 0.1 hours is basically 6 minutes. So this person put in 12 minutes into this game before writing this nonsensical diatribe of a quote-unquote review and posting it to Steam. And 5,000 people have found this nonsense to be helpful. And I'll even give a visual on that. So we have an hours to minutes converter. 0.2 hours is 12 minutes, as I already stated. So there is nothing of substance here. This person doesn't go into detail about the gameplay, doesn't go into detail about the story, probably because there is no story in here, doesn't go into detail about the level design or the limited exploration, doesn't go into detail about the technical issues or the overall performance of the game itself. And since this has been posted, this person still has yet to put in minimum 10 hours into this game. And see, this is the problem with Steam reviews, because Steam allows players to write a review for any game without actually putting in any substantial time into the game itself. In Black Myth Wukong specifically, if I go on how long to beat here, the game is listed to be 39 hours in length, which lines up with a lot of the claims of how long the game actually is with the critic reviews. Many of the critic reviews were saying the game was like 39, 40 hours long. There is no way in hell that you can accurately judge a game that's 40 hours long within just a handful of hours or less. Minimum for a game as long as Black Myth Wukong is, Steam should have a rule that you must put in at least 10 hours into the game before you can post a review. That's what the rule should be. But the site currently doesn't have such a restriction, and that's a problem because we have people that are basically giving asinine takes that make no sense, and it's contributing to the game's overall reception on the site. And even if you look at the negative reviews, these are no more helpful than the positive reviews. So this is probably the most helpful review in the negative category. Over 5,000 people found this review to be helpful. I'm going to translate this to English. Just skimming over this person is complaining about basically the performance of the game itself. If I filter to just the English language, it would seem that the case is the same with the English reviews as well. A bunch of people complaining about the performance issues. Now this person has put 8 hours into the game, gave it a negative review, is saying that it's a 7 out of 10, but is saying the gameplay is shit and there isn't much to do other than boss fights, unlike other Souls-likes. Basically, everyone fights bosses the exact same way, which gets you bored very quickly. It's a boss rush game. Now we have players that are confirming it. So it's not just the critics that are saying it, now it's the users as well. If I filter to the most recent English language and positive reviews, we have people giving the game positive ratings just because they like the graphics of the game, like this clown right here. We have people typing, I guess you could call that one word, doesn't seem to be a complete thought. Here's yet another one. One word. We have people trying to make political statements in their so-called review. 2.5 hours on record for a 39-hour game. Fuck the journalists, fuck the feminism propaganda, and fuck you, Miss. I'm assuming this person is referring to Asmongold or whatever that YouTuber's name is. We have people posting reviews that have incomplete thoughts that make no sense. Great game ever. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. 2.9 hours on record, good. 5 hours on record. I give this game a 10 out of 10 so far. Doesn't say anything about the game. Doesn't say anything about the level design. Doesn't say anything about the storytelling or the combat system or the exploration or anything of relevance. Game of the year, nothing to say. So we have basically a bunch of fanboy drones and shills with basically no backbone, no spine, with basically low standards across pretty much every review that I'm seeing here. This person whose review, quote unquote, is an outlier. This person has played at least half of the game's total runtime, received the game for free, and is now saying that this is the best game that this person has played this generation. Quality on everything. Well, if that was the case, I'd imagine that these scores would be higher than what they are, but sure. Here's another person trying to make a political statement. No DEI, no diversity, equity, and inclusion. 10 out of 10. And there are people that have posted negative reviews because of the lack of diversity controversy surrounding this game. So there are people trying to make political statements on both sides. Hardly anyone's actually talking about the game. I'm going to translate this to English. This person wants a map. The game apparently doesn't have a map. You put 2.6 hours into the game and you're giving it a positive review. Now, if I use myself as an example, I will not post any retrospective, any type of video essay or review on the channel unless I've played the entire game, from start to finish for any game that I play. There's only one game where I broke that rule because the game was literally that bad to where I refused to continue playing it, and that was Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. Aside from that, every game that I've played, good or bad, I have played the game, recorded the game from start to finish before making a retrospective, a review or video essay on said product. But clearly, most consumers are not reviewers, most consumers are not journalists, most consumers don't know how to write a proper review. I had a clown go up on the last video I made on this game, and this person was saying that they value user reviews more so than the critic reviews. And based off of what I just showed, there's no reason to value anything these people have to say. Because these people are nothing but a bunch of fanboys, shills, and again, people just with low standards. So when you factor all of that into the numbers that this game is pulling when it comes to concurrent player count, it really doesn't mean anything. The game is on a sugar rush right now because it just came out, and the game is also getting an abnormal boost because of the developer that made the game, the original novel that the game is based on, and the country of origin that the game comes from, which is China. And China right now has the largest population in the world. Chinese players are helping this game achieve these record-breaking numbers, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this game is still overhyped and it did not deliver on its full potential. And that's what should be taken away from this. These numbers ultimately don't mean anything at the end of the day. The concurrent player count, like any other game, will drop. The word of mouth surrounding the game will also drop. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. This is a single player game, so despite the fact that there is a New Game Plus feature that's been inserted into this, considering the limited scope of the content itself, the fact that the game is just a boss rush game that has you funneling from one boss to the next for 40 hours, pretty much for the entire runtime. Even more than that, the fact that there's no multiplayer, no co-op component to this game, and there may never be a multiplayer or co-op component for this game, which is the case for almost every other game on this list. Players are going to have less and less reason to return to a game like Black Myth Wukong. Again, at the end of the day, yeah, the game is breaking records right now, but it ultimately means nothing.